Now, I have something of an interest in the art world, and I've just come across an interesting article which suggests that there was a Cézanne masterpiece is the term they used, that was thrown in a hedge in Sussex in the south coast of England during World War One. And it's basically just an article about how come a Cézanne masterpiece ended up in a hedge in England. Now basically this masterpiece is a depiction of some fruit. It shows, I think it's apples. To me it doesn't strike me as a particularly interesting picture at all. And yet this is described as a masterpiece. Now, I do wonder if it's a case of, well, what I want to get at really is the perception that the art world is snobbery. Now, is snobby. Now, I looked at this painting and it wasn't bad, but it certainly wasn't anything special. And most of the comments underneath were in universal agreement about that. They just couldn't see why this is deemed to be a masterpiece just because it's a Cézanne. And no doubt if it was a Renoir or a Degas or you name it, a Matisse, it would be described as such as well, a Picasso. I have often seen some art that to me is incredible quality, and yet the artist is an anonymous figure. And that's something I have always found baffling in the art world. I don't know whether it's to do with the lucrative profits from an artist's name, or I honestly don't know what it is, if it's a period in which they were painting. I don't know enough about art to know what the reason for that is. I'm interested in art, but I don't claim to be an expert on art and art anthropology. But to give an example, I remember last year, shortly before I left China, I visited an artist studio in Guilin City, in Guangxi region. And some of the paintings in that studio were of such a quality, they could have been photographs. They weren't photographs, they were paintings, oil paintings. But really, the quality was absolutely incredible. For example, one depicted an old woman. The sort of lines on her face, the sort of expression, the depth in her eyes, everything was just so rich in colour, so realistic. He also done mountain scenes, landscapes. They were just, it's some of the best art I've ever seen in my life, honestly. And I've seen similar things in Britain. I've seen unknown or obscure artists coming out with these fantastic pictures, and yet they seem to get almost no attention for it. And yet you get a household name that is in the art world, like a Cézanne, coming out with something that honestly is quite dull, and just because it's a Cézanne, it's a masterpiece. Now, no doubt art critics will say I don't know what I'm talking about, and they'll describe why it is a masterpiece and so on. But to a layman looking in, someone who is maybe interested in art but isn't an expert or isn't very well informed in art anthropology, then it's genuinely quite baffling. And I know I'm not the only person to feel this way. I've never understood why there is this thing in the art world whereby something is considered great just because of the name behind it. Or maybe that's not the reason. I don't know what the reason is. But you look at some priceless works of art and you think, a child could do that. I mean, maybe that's wrong to say that, but it does. I know another example that a lot of people question is Rothko, the American artist Rothko. His works of art are basically two colours banded together. Now, I did watch a documentary about this, and it's a little bit more than that. It's not just two colours. There is some strategy in terms of how he's moulding the colours together. But nevertheless, some of these depictions are... another one would be Jackson Pollock. Some people say, oh well, anyone could do that. Anyone could splatter a canvas. So why does Jackson Pollock get renown? And it's something about the art world that I've always not quite been able to understand. No doubt as I develop an interest in this, as I develop perhaps my own art. I have experimented with my own style. At some point it may become obvious, but for now it's this very strange thing, and I do wonder, is there a very snobbish element to the art establishment, because it seems they have the final say on what is deemed to be good art, rather than what the public would regard as good art. It's almost like the art establishment are dictating, this is good art, you must see it as such, rather than actually going by the popularity of a piece in the public perception. So that's just some thoughts on that. Let me know what you think.